conflict of interest controversy around the We charity.
Yeah, this is in the West Block, just so people know. That's where the House of Commons is situated right now. And yes, he will take questions. Obviously, there will be questions about this big amount of money that is put on the table here and how that will be used. But undoubtedly, he will get some questions today as well about the other part of the story. And that's why the Prime Minister essentially came out on Monday. You might remember all of the questions that day were about the investigation by the Ethics Commissioner into a potential conflict of interest between the Prime Minister, his family, and the We charity. That's what he addressed on Monday, apologizing, saying that he had made a mistake, that he took responsibility for that. But in the meantime, there have been other developments on that story, perhaps most notably that the Ethics Commissioner says that he will now investigate the Finance Minister and a potential conflict of interest there, because the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, also had to apologize for not recusing himself from the cabinet table when that decision was made, because his daughter actually works for the charity, for the organization. So there's now another investigation from the Ethics Commissioner on the same file. And I should say, on the same day that all this is happening, we are expecting a committee hearing, a parliamentary committee hearing, to get underway. The Finance Committee is going to be the first parliamentary committee to start tackling some of this. And they are going to hear from Bardish Chagger, who's the minister who was responsible for the program, will be responsible for the program, whatever it looks like going forward. But perhaps even more critically, because we have, Bardish Chagger has given an interview, for instance, to my colleague Vashi Kapellas. One of the people we haven't heard from yet is the Deputy Minister of the department that recommended that we administer this program. And she is also expected to testify because, of course, the government has said throughout that this was the public services idea, that they turned to this organization, that it was best equipped to administer these grants for student volunteers. So that's also happening. And then tomorrow there's another committee, an ethics committee, that is set to hear from people and try and get some documents around this as well. So there's a lot happening in Ottawa for a week in July, and on a lot of different and important topics. This one, though, the Prime Minister really trying to get back to focusing on the pandemic and the government's response to this pandemic, and this part interesting because it is both public health and the economy, trying to tackle both of those issues across the country.
And you know, it is 2:32 Eastern, Rosie, and we're not seeing any real action yet with this news conference, but we're going to stay on it because, of course, we want to bring you it as soon as it begins out there and to know all the details. But can you tell me a little bit more about this restart plan and perhaps some other details you might be finding out about what we'll hear?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. We'll want to keep our ears out for premiers and mayors throughout the rest of the day after we hear some more of these details. Obviously, premiers would have been part of these negotiations, and I think Doug Ford is set to speak at 3:30 Eastern.
Yeah. And we'll have that live for sure.
Yeah, after his first haircut since the pandemic, we also took live. So he will be speaking, and I imagine mayors too, and other premiers across the country will have reaction to the deal. When the $14 billion was initially proposed by Ottawa, by the federal government, Doug Ford, for instance, his reaction was, this isn't enough. We are going to need significantly more. I think that is sort of the tendency of provinces to say that they always need more. And even though the relationship between the federal government and provinces has been pretty good over the course of the past number of months managing this pandemic, certainly there is a need, the provinces believe, for increased funding to a broad range of issues. One of them would be healthcare. This sounds like it is a one-time transfer to deal with some immediate issues, but undoubtedly there will have to be further conversations down the road about a more significant healthcare increased funding for provinces moving forward to deal with some of the vulnerabilities and problems that the pandemic has exposed. So we'll want to see what the reaction is, certainly, but this was a negotiation, and there have been calls between the Prime Minister and premiers weekly since since the pandemic began. We know that the Deputy Prime Minister, who will be at this press conference, has been heavily involved in those negotiations as well. And we know that she takes regular phone calls from the premiers to try and address some of their more pressing issues. So the fact that they've managed to reach an agreement, certainly a good sign for the provinces as they start to come down to brass tacks on how to tackle all of this.
All right, well, here he is, Prime Minister Trudeau, Rosie, so we're going to take a listen in to what he has to say.
Hello, everyone. From the outset, our government has worked closely with the provinces and territories to support Canadians during the pandemic. Fighting COVID-19 has always been a Team Canada effort, and it continues to be as we move into the recovery phase. We've been working with our provincial and territorial partners to outline what needs to be done over the next 6 to 8 months to safely restart our economy. And today, I have some good news to share. Our government will invest over $19 billion to ensure the provinces and territories have the support they need to protect the health of Canadians, help people get back to work safely, and prepare for a potential second wave. As part of this agreement, we've outlined 7 priority areas on which to focus our efforts, like increased testing and contact tracing, securing more personal protective equipment, and more support for the most vulnerable, including for seniors in long-term care facilities and nursing homes. But COVID-19 isn't just a health crisis, it's an economic crisis, too. So when we talk about the recovery phase, it's not just about making sure we can detect, control, and prevent future outbreaks. It's also about helping people, businesses, and entire communities adjust to our new normal. Because until we find a vaccine, the daily threat of COVID-19 will not disappear. In addition to buying more PPE so workers can follow public health guidelines at the office, we also have to make sure that people can get to work safely, that children are looked after, and that those who can't find work right away are supported. So, making sure there are enough safe childcare spaces available, or supporting people who don't have paid sick leave. Those must be top priorities, too. This agreement also includes more support for municipalities. Our towns and cities have been at the forefront of responding to COVID-19. Cities must remain up and running if our economy is to eventually get back up and running. If cities aren't equipped for a safe restart, people will not be safe. That's why today's agreement provides municipalities with funding to cover operational costs. We're also going to give more support to transit, specifically. If we want people to participate in the economy, they need to be able to get to work safely. No one should have to turn down a job because they don't want to risk their health during a crowded commute. Investments in municipalities and in transit will be shared evenly between the federal and provincial governments. As we prepare our economic recovery, all orders of government know we have to keep working together to keep people safe. On that note, I want to thank Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, the premiers, and officials who've worked hard to support Canadians and lay the groundwork for our economic recovery with this agreement. Au cours des dernières semaines,
Over the last weeks, we have worked with the governments of provinces and territories to decide on what we need to do in the next 6 and 8 months to safely restart the economy. And today I have good news to announce. Our government will invest more than $19 billion to help provinces and territories to have necessary resources to protect the health of Canadians and help people get back to work and prepare for a potential second wave. As part of this agreement, we have identified 7 priority sectors where we need to focus. We have to increase our testing capacities and contact tracing, provide more personal protective equipment, and provide more support to the most vulnerable, especially seniors in healthcare facilities and long-term care homes. COVID-19 is not only a health crisis, it's also an economic crisis. To deal with it, not only do we have to improve our capacity to detect, heal, and prevent COVID-19, we must also help people, enterprises, and communities to adapt to a new normal, because the threat of COVID-19 will remain present for as long as there is no vaccine. It's not enough to buy more personal protective equipment for people to be able to respect public health measures at work, but we have to help people go to work safely. We have to help them take care of their children and make sure that those who cannot work immediately receive support. We have to make sure that there's enough childcare spaces for people who don't have paid sick leave. All that should be part of our priorities. The agreement signed today also has new support for municipalities. Our cities are at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19, and this from the very beginning. For a safe restart of our economy, our cities must have the tools and resources necessary to prepare. Otherwise, we will be putting the lives of people at risk. The agreement provides more support to help municipalities with operational costs. We will also invest in transit, because no one should have to say no to work because they don't want to risk their health every day. Investments in transport and municipalities will be shared equally between the federal government and the provincial governments. All orders of government will continue to work together to prepare and make sure that the economy restarts. Canadians can't continue counting on us.
Press conference with some news regarding the Canada-US border. Once again, Canada and the United States have agreed to extend the current border measures by 1 month until August 21st. And we're going to keep working closely with our American neighbors to keep people safe on both sides of the border.
To conclude today, I have some news about the Canadian-US border. I can now confirm that Canada and the US have agreed to extend current border measures already in place by a month up to the 21st. Tomorrow, Minister Morneau would be providing more details about the emergency wage subsidy, and he will have more to say about ways in which we intend to provide more support to people living with disabilities. We'll be having more news from opposition parties tomorrow. Once again, thank you for listening to us, and I now hand over the floor to Deputy Prime Minister, Madam Chrystia Freeland. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Today is a great day for Canada, and I am really, really happy to be here to talk with you about it. From the start, a Team Canada response to the COVID-19 pandemic has not only been desirable, it has been absolutely essential. Our shared public health goal has been to save the lives of Canadians, to protect the health of Canadians, and to prevent our healthcare system from being overwhelmed. Our shared economic goal has been to ensure that no Canadian goes hungry or is made homeless because of the economic slowdown inevitably caused by the healthcare measures we have taken in response to this global pandemic. To those first two priorities, today we add a third: the safe restart of our country's economy, so that families in every part of Canada can get back on their feet in a way that is safe and sustainable for the long term. And that is why I am so thrilled that we're able to talk to you today about the Safe Restart Agreement that the federal government has reached with the provinces and territories.
Today's agreement will help the provinces and territories with millions of dollars to support lives and municipalities, support towns and municipalities. We know that if our cities are not provided the necessary support, Canada also will not be able to survive. We will be providing support to increase testing, contact tracing, and collecting public health data. This takes into account challenges like mental health, substance abuse, and hopelessness. Procurement of personal protective equipment for healthcare workers and all other essential workers will be taken care of. There will be additional support for people working in long-term care facilities, those who need home care and palliative care, additional spaces in childcare facilities, and we will respond to those who have unique challenges because of the pandemic, particularly women. Introduction of paid sick leave for those who do not yet have it, so that all workers could take up to 10 days of sick leave if they need it.
This is what today's agreement with the provinces and territories will do. Critically, it will provide billions of dollars in support for our towns and cities. We know that if our cities are not equipped for a safe restart, including when it comes to transit, Canada won't be either. It will support the costs of increasing our testing capacity, contact tracing, and gathering public health data. It will support the significant demands on provincial and territorial healthcare systems, including, critically, support for mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. This agreement will help our country buy enough PPE for healthcare workers and other essential workers, and critically, be ready in the event of a second wave. We will have added support for people in long-term care homes, home care, and palliative care. This agreement will address the reduced availability of childcare spaces and the unique needs stemming from the pandemic, particularly for women and mothers. And it will establish sick leave where it is not already available across our country, so that every worker can take up to 6 days of sick leave if they need it and protect their health and the health of the people around them. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic has profoundly disrupted our society and our economy, and it will continue to do so in ways we cannot yet predict. We know one thing, though. We can only meet this huge challenge effectively if we work together as Team Canada, if we set aside our partisan divisions and we all come together to get our country through this. And that is what we have done with the Safe Restart Agreement that we concluded today. I'd like to thank all of the premiers of the provinces and territories and mayors across our country for getting this across the finish line.
Thank you.
We are ready for your questions.
We will be doing a 15-minute question period. One question, one follow-up. We will start with journalists over the phone, then turn to the floor. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Charlie Pinkerton, iPolitics. Line open.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. On May 12th, the National Research Council announced a partnership with the Chinese pharmaceutical company CanSino Biologics to start human trials in Canada for its COVID-19 vaccine. A couple days later, Health Canada gave the company the necessary approval to begin testing. This vaccine has not arrived in the hands of Canadian researchers yet because it's still awaiting approval by China's customs. Do you believe this is yet another pressure tactic against Canada in the ongoing political feud between the countries? And what is your government doing to ensure China's customs quickly approves this shipment?
This particular approach is one that has worked well in the past. This partnership actually created significant measures against Ebola a number of years ago. And as we're looking at developing a vaccine, we're investing in many different approaches to try and get to figure out where that vaccine will come from. Canada has some of the top researchers in the world working here in Canada and in partnership with partners around the world. We're trying to follow all the different paths we can to ensure that when a vaccine is developed, Canada will be part of it or will have access to it. We're obviously continuing to work with the Chinese government to ensure that this work can continue in an uninterrupted fashion.
Following up.
All right, and about the same actual company, CanSino, it's recently been reported that they're in talks with countries that include Russia to begin similar trials that were supposed to begin here in Canada more than a month ago. Would your government reassess its partnership with this company if it strikes an agreement with a country that Canada's intelligence agency just revealed was trying to steal Canada's own vaccine research?
I think we're in a situation right now where the entire world is working very hard together as much as possible to develop a vaccine to put an end to this global pandemic. We recognize that we don't know which collaboration, which country or which area is going to develop that vaccine, so we're working with partners around the world. We will ensure every step of the way, as we've highlighted, to protect Canadian intellectual property and to protect the hard work of our researchers and ensure that we're doing everything right. But at the same time, we recognize the need for global collaboration in order to get through this global pandemic, and we will get that balance right. Okay.
We do understand that it's very important for us to develop solutions throughout the world to find a vaccine. We do not know who will discover the vaccine, so we need to participate in various initiatives. That is important to make sure that Canada can eventually have a vaccine when one is found. At the same time, we will continue protecting Canada's intellectual property and prevent as much as possible spying from other countries. We shall continue looking for ways of finding a right balance between intellectual property and participation in initiatives which could directly benefit Canada and the world. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Are you willing to testify at a parliamentary committee about the WE contract?
I'm looking forward to speaking next week at Parliament. I know there'll be a range of questions from opposition parties. I'm happy to take questions now. As I said, we've received an invitation to testify at committee, and the House leadership team is looking at that. Okay.
As I said, I remain open to answering questions asked by Canadians, MPs, and the media on all types of topics. My team received an invitation to appear before a committee. We are closely studying that request.
Prime Minister inform you of his family's personal ties to WE. And Prime Minister, if you didn't inform Ms. Freeland of that, what does that say that you didn't inform your Deputy Prime Minister about a core personal relationship with a contract of around nearly $1 billion?
Thank you for the question, Mackenzie, and it's nice to see you. As the Prime Minister has said, I think all of us, everyone in our government, everyone in the cabinet, bears responsibility for this situation. And I'd like to say, speaking for myself, that I accept that responsibility and I very much regret what has happened. And I'd like to say to Canadians, I'm really sorry. We have so many huge issues facing our country. Clearly, our government made a mistake, and I want to say to people, we're going to learn from it. In terms of how the situation was discussed, I think all Canadians knew that the Prime Minister and his family had been involved with WE. I think there are very, very many Canadians across the country who have had connections with WE, whether it's school children in elementary schools across the country or lots of other Canadians. When it comes to the specific financial connections, the Prime Minister has been very clear with Canadians that he apologizes and regrets how the situation developed.
Thank you. We'll now go to a question over the phone. Opérateur.
Okay. And I'm glad to have the chance to repeat myself in French because I would like to add, to be very clear, the Prime Minister has my complete confidence. It is a privilege for me to serve in his cabinet and to serve Canadians. Concernant la situation autour de l'organisation de WE,
regarding the situation with WE, let me start by saying that I am very sorry. I am completely aware of the fact that as Minister of the Cabinet and as a deputy prime minister, I have to take some responsibility for the situation. I regret the situation, absolutely. I want to apologize before all Canadians for what we did. Thank you. Maybe repeat in French that the Prime Minister also stated that he regrets the situation. Let me add that the Prime Minister enjoys my total confidence, and it is a privilege for me to work with him and to work in our cabinet. Thank you. As I said on Monday, I deeply regret the situation. I should have withdrawn from the discussions concerning I did not do that. And as a result, we are facing more challenges providing opportunities for youth, something that has been a priority during my entire career, even before I joined politics.
Trying to create opportunities for young people, opportunities for kids to get involved. This is something that I believe in deeply. And as I said Monday, I deeply regret that I didn't recuse myself from discussions on this, because it has made it more difficult for the government to ensure that young people can contribute to their communities right across the country during this time of pandemic.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go over the phone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question. Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning. Good day, Mr. Prime Minister. Let me come back to the announcement you've made with the provinces. You stated some conditions and sectors where the money should go, and you came back to that today. When we talk to the provinces, over the past few days, they are simply saying that it's targeted money that is being provided to those sectors. No conditions are imposed on the conditions for spending the money. Could you please clarify how that will work? Have you abandoned the conditions you initially mentioned? Is there a specific agreement with Quebec, or is it the same model with the other provinces? It's the same model with the provinces. We were able to negotiate with all provinces. Of course, we had to take into account the specificities on the fields and in the different provinces, but we negotiated together to get to that agreement. And Marie, as you've said, it was very important for us to make sure that the money targeting childcare and security, safety in childcare went for that, and that the money sent for personal protective equipment should be spent for that. And we were able to arrive at an agreement. There's no flexibility to transfer money from one zone to another. The provinces agreed to invest in the targeted sectors as per the agreement. Provinces will be telling us exactly how the money will be invested publicly. That is how we would make sure that the money targeting municipalities, targeting our seniors, would truly be intended for that purpose.
Really important throughout is that we keep negotiating all together. We obviously understood that different provinces were facing different realities, and therefore there needed to be a certain amount of flexibility within the sectors or the buckets that we were laying out. But it was also extremely important that all these different elements, these 7 different areas for a restart, were each extremely important, and the provinces couldn't take money from one bucket and put it in another one that is more of a priority for them. So we managed to get to an agreement where the money that is designated for safe childcare spaces, for example, the money that is designated for PPE, the money that is designated for testing and contact tracing, actually will get spent in those areas. There are areas like support for vulnerable people where we will expect the provinces to declare publicly what exactly they intend to do in terms of support for the vulnerable peoples. And that for us is a way of ensuring that Canadians who need help through this restart will get it from this historic agreement with the provinces. Chrystia?
Thank Thank you, Prime Minister. Marie, je veux juste ajouter que
Marie,
vous avez parlé
let me simply
de
add
l'effort du fédéral
that you
de
talked about
imposer les
efforts
conditions
being made by the
sur les
federal
provinces.
government to impose conditions on the provinces.
Exact. Ce n'était pas la situation.
That is not the
Je pense
situation.
qu'on
That is
doit
not correct.
commencer
I think we need to
avec
start
l'idée que
with the
nous
idea
avons les provinces, les territoires,
that we
les
have
villes,
the
le
provinces,
fédéral.
federal
Nous avons
government,
tous une but
municipalities, we all have a common objective, and that common goal is to protect the health of Canadians and to ensure that there's a safe restart.
C'est vraiment un effort en commun.
It's a real
C'est
collective
vraiment
effort.
un accord gagnant-gagnant.
It's a win-win
Oui, c'est
agreement.
vrai que le
Yes, it is true
fédéral
that the federal
avoir
government
une garantie pour tous les
wants some
Canadiens
guarantees for all
qu'on aura
Canadians
les niveaux nécessaires
that
de
we will have the right levels of testing, for example. But the provinces and territories want the same thing. So it's very important, I believe, to understand the agreement as being an important stage in our common work, in our collaboration, because all leaders in Canada, the leaders of the provinces, territories, cities, federal government, we all understand the importance of working together against the impact of the coronavirus. Thank you. Follow-up question, Marie? Thank you. I understand, Mr. Trudeau, that money should go to the sectors that you've targeted. The provinces cannot spend the money, can spend it as they will in that sector. My follow-up question, with India, the provinces are also saying that the money is just the beginning. How much more are you willing to add, considering that the announcement last week said that Quebec had spent 90% of the direct aid that had been provided? First of all, something we've seen globally is that countries where management of the economic and health crisis are being well done are areas where the various orders of government have been able to work together to protect their citizens. And that is exactly what we have been able to demonstrate today. We have been able to work together on common concerns to protect our citizens and restart the economy. Yes, we have targeted various sectors where the provinces will need to spend the money, but it's going to be up to them to explain, according to set criteria, how the money will be spent, so that people should know we are here to help them together. Regarding the work we'll continue to do together, we do acknowledge the fact that these are historic times. We needed those $19 billion to resolve the current issue over the next few months. But of course, if there's restart and a second wave and other challenges, we will continue working with the provinces and territories. Thank you. Last question on the floor.
Hi, Prime Minister. David Cochran from CBC News. I don't know if I get a follow-up, so I'm going to double barrel this. This is a 6 to 8 month agreement. The money will be done by then, but the virus may not. So is there provision for a rollover and extension, or does that require a whole separate set of negotiations? And on the we issue, I want to get clarity to your answer to Mackenzie earlier. Are you considering the option of testifying at finance? And because this involves you and people close to you, would you consider a full cabinet waiver or a partial cabinet waiver, like with SNC-Lavalin, so people can get more answers that might be available through normal means?
We are in an unprecedented pandemic, which is why it was so important for us to make sure that right across the country there is the ability to support Canadians in a safe restart of the economy, which means investments in making sure that childcare spaces are able to be safe for kids and for families right across the country, investments to protect our elders and other vulnerable populations, investments in more PPE, investments in transit, investments in municipal operating costs, the kinds of things that actually really matter to Canadians. And that's what this agreement is about. It will cover a large part of the next 6 to 8 months, but we recognize that perhaps the pandemic will extend longer than that. Certainly it is likely to, since the vaccine seems to be a fair bit away. We will continue to work hand in glove with the provinces and territories to make sure that every step of the way Canadians are supported in both their health needs, but also in the relaunching of the economy. In regards to the issue around committees, as I said, we've received invitations. I've received an invitation to attend committee. We are looking at that. I believe in openness and transparency. We've been open and transparent with Canadians as I take questions, as I respond to questions in the House from parliamentarians, and as I said, we're still making determinations around what further openness we can show. Merci. We're not at that point yet of reflecting on that.
And if I could just say about the safe restart and the provinces, look, David, no one can truthfully tell you that they know where Canada or the world will be in 6 to 8 months. And I don't think any of us want to pretend otherwise to Canadians. We are going to continue working with the provinces and territories. We're going to continue working with the municipalities. We're getting pretty good at it. Over the past few days, I have been on the phone with so many premiers, so many mayors, pretty much constantly. I really want to thank that whole group for putting their shoulder to the wheel. I've been back and forth with the PM a lot, sharing every twist
15 First Ministers meetings over the past couple of months, which is a new record.
And this is a really big deal to be able to get 13 provinces and territories and the federal government in a deal that very much involves the municipalities because they are a part of it. Across, it's not just in one sector, it's not just in one area, across a whole number of different ministries. To do this kind of a multi-part deal really shows that Canadians across the country, across different political parties, have understood we need to work together. And I hope that Canadians, as we all work in our own lives to restart the economy, to live with coronavirus, can take some comfort and gain some confidence from knowing that at the political level, at all political levels, we're working together because we know how important that is.
Dernière question de développement.
Last question.
With Global News, Air Canada sent a letter yesterday urging the federal government to ease travel restrictions and quarantine requirements for international travelers. Is this something that your government is considering?
Our priority is the safety of Canadians. I understand how difficult it is to see these travel restrictions in place, but Canadians understand that keeping our cities, our municipalities, our elders, our frontline workers safe by preventing international travel is a continued thing we need to do. We will be continuing to keep Canadians safe by limiting international travel. Nous savons que la priorité maintenant.
We know that the priority now, even though it's difficult for some sectors and people, is to make sure that people remain safe. And that means we need to continue restrictions on international travel. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. That's the end of the press conference today.
Okay, we were just listening in there, of course, to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Deputy PM Chrystia Freeland announcing details of the Safe Restart Agreement, announcing a $19 billion agreement with provincial and territorial governments. That's invested money to help people get back to work, to reopen economies, as well as help cities and towns prepare for a possible second wave of COVID-19. We're going to bring in Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton to kind of break it all down for us. And what stood out for you in this announcement?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. First, the recognition that this is money that is needed by the provinces, but that there could be more money needed by the provinces because we don't really know what the future holds. That this deal is to cover 6 to 8 months, that it is a significant amount of money, more even than the federal government had initially put on the table. And this is particularly interesting because it is always a point of contention between the federal government and provinces provinces did agree to some conditions around the use of the money. Most provinces don't like that idea, don't like quote-unquote strings attached when it comes to taking federal transfers. But in this case, they have agreed that you won't be able to move the money around between the 7 priorities the Prime Minister listed there. If you are taking money for personal protective equipment, that's what it's for. You can't, though, go put it into something else that is important to your province. So that's interesting to me that they got to a place where provinces agreed to some sort of basic conditions around the money. There's also, I think, a recognition that the provinces are going to have to report back and be pretty transparent about how they're using that money. The Prime Minister specifically pointed to vulnerable people, which of course could mean a variety of different people in society, including seniors or homeless people. And there, the provinces are going to have to say, this is actually how we spent the money. So I think that shows not only a high level of collaboration and cooperation between both levels of government, but also a real, perhaps, sense of desperation from the provinces who are quickly running out of cash and need what the federal government has to offer, and so perhaps had to take conditions that in normal circumstances they wouldn't be so keen to take. So that, I think, is very important. I'll just give the other 2 little bits of news that stood out for me there, Asha. First of all, confirmation of news we had reported earlier this week that the border remains closed to non-essential travel until August. That deal has now all been inked and put to bed. And that tomorrow we will hear from the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, about the extension of the wage subsidy, which the Prime Minister announced earlier this week will now go until December. So the Finance Minister will talk a little bit more about how that will be expanded. It's hugely important for companies to know that they have that potential stability for more months. So that is to come tomorrow, as well as news, and I mention this because so many Canadians have emailed me directly about this, news around the disability top-ups for Canadians who receive disability payments from the federal government. There had been a move to get those payments to Canadians, and unfortunately it collapsed because of politics, essentially. They couldn't get everybody on side to move ahead with it. It sounds like now there is a draft piece of legislation that will get those top-ups to people who qualify soon. So that will be important news for Canadians, disabled Canadians, or Canadians who qualify for that disability federal tax credit. Sounds like there's some movement on that as well.
So we got a lot of details, a lot of information to really digest here. But as expected, Rosie, a lot of questions as well about the We Charity controversy. Even Chrystia Freeland talking about it and saying that she supports and backs and has the confidence of Prime Minister Trudeau.
Yeah, and we should say that at this hour there is a Finance Committee meeting happening right now where there is some testimony and witnesses appearing to start getting a first glimpse into how this unfolded at the Cabinet table. That is the Minister responsible, Bardish Chagger, you see on your screen there. Obviously it's all being done virtually, but we are going to hear from more witnesses too to outline why it was that the federal government chose this organization, why it was that the Public Service says this was the obvious choice. The Prime Minister was asked a couple of key questions there, whether he would be willing to testify in front of a parliamentary committee, because he has been invited to do so. He did not commit to that. He was also asked by my colleague David Cochrane whether he would waive some cabinet confidences around this issue. That had previously been done in a very limited way around the SNC affair, which happened last year. There was no commitment on that. The Prime Minister says they haven't gotten to that point in their thinking yet. But the comments by Chrystia Freeland were particularly interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, because she herself, as a member of the cabinet, took some responsibility for not being aware enough of the situation and asking questions, I suppose. And then she took the time to make sure that people knew that she still had full confidence in the Prime Minister and his cabinet and his government. And that is important because as things happen in Ottawa, there's always rumblings about who might be interested in being the next leader of the Liberal Party. And in those situations, Chrystia Freeland's name certainly comes up. So for her to take the time to say that she continued to have confidence in the Prime Minister and was pleased to be part of his cabinet is significant to help quelling those rumors that go around the nation's capital. But also interesting that she, just as someone who was at the cabinet table when that decision was made, also wanted to offer her apologies for not getting it right, frankly.
Very interesting stuff. Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks, Asha.
CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton in Ottawa. And as Rosie mentioned, in Ottawa, the Federal Finance Committee is studying the We Charity controversy right now. We were just hearing from Youth Minister Bardish Chagger. Let's take a listen in.
Est-ce qu'on peut éclaircir ce point-là, Monsieur le Président?
Can we clarify that, please, sir?
Yes, it is